Hi guys, we are back for another episode of Seedsheet Live because it's Thursday at noon and we have a beautiful snowy day outside our offices right now in Vermont. So I'm super excited about that, but I'm also really excited to talk to you guys about a Seedsheet breakfast option. So today we're going to make a frittata, which is absolutely one of my favorites because you can make a frittata and you can eat it for all day, breakfast, lunch, dinner, and I'm super happy to be doing that. So we've got the basics for a frittata to start, and then you can always mix it up with a frittata. That's the nice thing. You can throw absolutely anything you want in there, vegetables, herbs, meat, cheese, anything you want. So we're gonna do just a super basic one. I'm gonna start with one of our mini herb kits right here. We've got some really great dill. So I'm gonna harvest a little bit of that. And then I've pre-harvested a little bit of basil because I wanted to wash it first. So I haven't, I've already harvested that, so I'm not gonna harvest that right now, but I've got that already on my board. So let's take a little bit of this delicious dill. So the way that you can harvest dill is you can take a portion of a frond or you can take an entire frond. So I can tell that this guy right here is pretty mature because the stem is pretty thick. So I'm gonna take that entire frond, that entire stem, just like that. And I'm gonna take, let's take one more really mature one until this guy's mature. Again, the stem is pretty thick and it's pretty tall. So I'm gonna take it right at the base and that should be enough dill for me today. So that's perfect. So I'm gonna use basil and dill in our frittata today. I'm also gonna use spinach, which I harvested off of one of our salad kits as well. And then I've got these really gorgeous tomatoes that come from a caprese kit. So those are really delicious and perfectly ripe as well. So for a basic frittata, you're gonna start with 8 eggs, half a cup of milk, 3/4 teaspoon salt, and 1/4 teaspoon pepper. So that is what every frittata's base is going to be. So we've got 8 eggs. I'm just gonna whip these really quick. And I'm gonna add my milk and my salt and my pepper. And I'm gonna throw some fontina cheese in here. Oh, I'm sorry, I've got Asiago for us today. But you could always use fontina. You can use cheddar, you can use Gruyere, you can use pretty much any cheese you want. You can even toss some feta in there, or you can add some globs of some big, nice scoops of ricotta in there as well. So those are getting whipped. Put my salt and my milk and my pepper in there. And I've got a pan preheating. So with a frittata, you start it on the stove top and then you move it into the oven and you finish cooking directly in the oven. So that is nice and whipped. I'm going to cut my tomatoes really quick, and then I'm gonna wilt my spinach, pre-wilt my spinach. And then that will go into the pan. And we'll wilt that, and then we'll add our eggs so that they are the last thing to go in. And then we put our cheese and our herbs in as well, and then we're gonna pat everything down so that it's not sticking up out of the eggs. And when you cook a frittata, you just wanna cook it on a stovetop just until the edges start to crawl inward and release from the pan just a little bit. So I've got a little bit of olive oil in here. I'll spread that around my pan. I can tell that my pan's a little too hot. We have a new burner, so I'm still getting used to that. So I'm just spreading around my pan so we have a nice non-stick surface. I'm gonna add my tomatoes just so those cook down just a little bit and they aren't super liquidy. And while those start to break down just a little bit, I'm gonna chop my herbs up. So we've got dill, beautiful dill. I'm gonna take my big thick stems off of that, and then I'm just gonna fold it over on itself so it's a little bundle. And then I just chop, chop, chop so it's pretty finely cut. And that's all you need to do with dill. Just avoid the big thick stems, and all of the frond is super delicious and it's very fragrant, and I really love the smell of dill. And then I've got my basil. I'm gonna do exactly the same thing with that. I'm just gonna bundle it, and then I'm going to chop it. I can chop basil a little bit thicker than I would with dill, and I'm gonna reserve a little bit of this to go on top as well. And you can do the same with your dill if you'd like. All right, so my tomatoes are starting to break down. I'm gonna add my spinach so that it wilts. This looks like a lot of spinach, I know, but it will break down so quickly and it'll wilt down so that you have just a little bit of spinach going into your frittata. And again, you can put anything that you want into a frittata. I like broccoli or broccoli rabe is really good, or broccolini, asparagus. Lots of people do asparagus, and cheese and ham is a really popular combination. And you can tell that this spinach is already starting to wilt down. This is exactly what we want to see. I really love the spinach variety that's in both our large balcony salad kit and in our mini kit. It's very prolific, and you can get a continuous harvest out of that so that you can continue to harvest for several weeks, and you can get a lot of use out of it. Out of that, even just out of the mini kit. You can get a lot of leafy greens out of there. So you can see this breaks down a lot. So that big pile of spinach is perfectly broken down into a nice wilt. And then I'm going to add our egg. That is beautiful. All right, give these eggs one last little whip. Perfect. I'll toss those in. Beautiful. All right, I'm just gonna give it a little stir so nothing's really stuck to the bottom. You want to make sure that those tomatoes and the spinach aren't totally stuck to the bottom. And it's pretty and it's all evenly distributed, so that's perfect. That's gonna cook for a little bit. So while that's cooking, I'm just gonna toss in some of my beautiful dill and some basil. And then I'm gonna go back and chop some cheese and put that in there too. I chose this cheese because I like it when it stays in kind of little chunks. And this cheese will stay in little chunks and it won't get super melty and get lost in the eggs. So I'm just gonna cut this into little squares or little rectangles. And then we'll sprinkle this into our frittata. Right on top. And while that cooks down a little bit more, we have some common questions that we've been getting over the last week or so. So why don't I add this, and then Nick, you can tell us what questions we've had recently. So that is beautiful, that cheese is in there, and I'm just gonna tuck everything into the egg so that nothing's really sticking out the top and everything's been submerged a little bit. And that is gorgeous. So we're gonna let this cook a little bit, and I'm gonna turn the heat up just so that we can get the edges of our frittata. Perfect. Nick, what did you have for us this week?
Yeah, so we're coming up on springtime, which means planting season for a lot of people, and people are just wondering, you know, when is the best time to plant? It's going to be dependent on where you live, but you know.
Yeah. So I've brought a little bit of a display for you today, an exhibit, if you will. So every one of our packages and on our website, we have this really awesome handy dandy map, and it is color coded rather, for your location. So if you find yourself on the map and you are, you're within this blue zone, this light blue zone, you would want to plant outside between April and September. That is your window to start planting outside. So you don't really want to start earlier than that unless you're really, really positive that your frost zone is totally over and there's not going to be another frost outside. You can also start your kits inside and then transfer them outside. You don't need to transplant anything with a seed sheet, but you could start it indoor a week or two before your frost end date, and then you can move your container outside. You want to be vigilant though if you are going to be moving it outside. You don't want the temperature to drop below about 55 degrees with your kit. So if you're going to see temperatures below that, especially at night, definitely pick your garden up and move it back inside. And then you can move it back outside once the weather warms up a little bit more. So check out our little map on all of our packages and then also on our website as well. If you have any specific questions, if you're not quite sure where you are on that map, or if you have more specific location questions, definitely shoot us an email. info@seedsheets.com is the best way to get a hold of us, but you can also get a hold of us on social media, Facebook, Instagram, anything. We are here to help. So that's a great question. Especially people in the South are starting to gear up to plant. You don't need to deal with any of those large seed trays or anything like that. You can always just use a seed sheet and you can start it indoors, move it right outside when you're ready. Great question. So we are back over here with our frittata. You can tell that the edges are starting to get a little bit done, which is great. You can tell right here that the edges are starting to separate from the pan. So that's exactly what we want to see. So I'm going to let this cook for another minute, but I have actually pre-made us a frittata so you can see exactly what it'll look like after you pull it out of the oven. So as soon as the edges are done here, you're going to want to stick it into the oven at 350 for about 16 to 18 minutes, and you want the top to be lightly browned, and the edges will be done completely. You want the eggs to be set. You don't want them to be jiggly or anything like that. So I'm going to actually top this with a little bit more basil. And if you've got a little bit more dill, you could do that as well. And you can toss some parsley on there as well. I love parsley with eggs. So I'm going to do that as well. And you can top it with a little grated cheese if you'd like. You can always do that as well. And this is beautiful, and you can heat it up or you can eat it cold, whichever you'd like. You can pack it for a lunch. It's super easy like that as well, and you can eat it for dinner too. So it's a super delicious seed sheet frittata for you, and you can throw anything you want in there, anything you've got in your fridge, anything you can grow with the seed sheet can go directly into a frittata. So, as usual, if you guys have any gardening questions whatsoever, traditional gardening methods or seed sheet gardening, we are here to help. So hit us up on Instagram, Facebook, email, however you want to get a hold of us. We are here to help. Have a fantastic weekend, guys, and we'll see you next week.